And we are back on the build phase. This is going to be our first card opening of 2023. And man, does it feel good to get back to a world where we actually get to open versus cards and talk about new versus cards. So I'm super, super, super excited to look at what the House of X has in store for us. So let's get into it. Now, for anybody who's been keeping track, all of 2022, we got the Disney Plus arc. Now, that was originally scheduled to be released as sort of like the first three expansions in 2022, so February, March, the spring arc. This would have been our June box if things were going according to plan. Well, things didn't go according to plan, and I mean, that's pretty understandable. So I'm not complaining about it, but just that's where this set was originally kind of in the production. This should have been the summer set, the arc leading into Gen Con last year. That's this box. Okay. So we've looked at some of these cards through card reveals, and the entire rest of the box was exposed on the Upper Deck stream last week. Thank you to them. Like, thank goodness. I really got to give credit to Upper Deck for, particularly in this kind of dark era of the game, uh, giving us stuff to look forward to. Things as simple as unboxings. It's great. Like this is what the community wants. They're moving in the right direction, so I want to give them like major credit for that, which is hard to do when we're this far behind on sets. Uh, I don't really want to go through the rule book. If there's a specific card that we have to look up a rule for, we'll look it up in the rule book. Token sheet, as is typical, we'll set that stuff aside and let's start talking about new cards. So I guess we'll start with the Brotherhood stack. We're gonna set the X-Men aside for now. And these cards have been out in the wild for a week or so at this point. Now, generally, when I try to do reaction streams, I try to give my knee jerk, my in the moment reactions, and I think that's kind of fun because I get stuff wrong, and being wrong is well, it's not fun for me, but it's fun for everybody else to see. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you missed this or whatever. Um, when I looked at the level two for this Juggernaut guy, I thought, oh my goodness, this has to be like the world's worst level up condition. Uh, there's no way they're going to put this on something that's achievable. And they did kind of put it on a card that's achievable. Now, when I look at a level one Brotherhood affiliated 556, that all seems pretty good. Invulnerable, main phase, pay a green, Juggernaut can't be stunned or wounded this turn. That feels pretty good. Like we've seen the Luke Cage card, the main character from the Defenders box, has a very similar superpower to this. We've seen that perform well, and this lasts until the end of turn, whereas I believe Luke Cage's was just for the combat. So this is actually better than that, and we know that that power can be good. Now, the Crimson Gem of Sidorak. This is a level up 2. When you play a red basic location, Juggernaut gains an XP. Now, in my head, what I immediately compared this to was Black Widow, who I remembered having a requirement of playing 4 red locations, and that saw some fringe play. It wasn't the most popular deck, but it definitely was around, and the payoff for the Shield affiliated Black Widow is pretty good. Her level 2 has some gnarly stuff that it can do. So I thought, all right, this is a little bit harder than that, but it's not the end of the world. Bert pointed out that this is basically requiring you to get 2 of 4, so it's basically the exact same level up condition as the Crimson Cowl. Now, I like. Uh, let me qualify this. In a casual sense, I really like the Crimson Cowl Ultron character, where you have to get the 2 Avengers mansions in order to level this guy up. All that works, but Bird's correct in saying that this is just borderline impossible to do consistently. In the games where you get it, you feel like the most powerful person who's ever existed. And this, when you get this level 2 on turn 2, and you can, I guess I'll read the card here. He retains the invulnerable, then he becomes a 5/10/6 and has pay 2 reds. He has infinity attack for the rest of the game. So when you get a infinity 10 on turn 2, you probably feel amazing. But most of the time, that's probably is not what's gonna happen. And in any format where Kane is not available, or potentially, I mean, Mirage is much worse as a way to kind of cheat this, and you still have to draw at least one. I think in formats where Kane exists, this guy will probably exist too. We've seen other main characters that really need a lot of one specific color, like I'm looking at Rogue, and she kind of lived or died by Kane to some degree. Now, Rogue was kind of stronger all the way around, and her level ups weren't as unforgiving. This is exactly red basic locations. So I think people are right that this guy is going to be harder to level than you initially think. But anytime there's a format with Kane, having an infinity attack main character as early as level 2 is a threat that we can't totally overlook. Moving on to Magneto. So we saw his level 1 before, and it's very, very similar to the Professor X's. Uh, Magneto is Brotherhood affiliated. He's a 255 with flight and range. That's an okay stat line, I guess, for level 1. Pay a yellow, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, put a Brotherhood and an X-Men supporting character into your hand. Each Brotherhood, that's important. It's not it's each. So if you flip 4 characters, you get to keep 4 characters, assuming they have the appropriate team affiliations. And if this is your main character, you're probably building your deck around having the appropriate team affiliations. Um, Overall, I think this is probably going to be a consistent draw two. You're going to have the occasional one, the occasional three, but I think consistently, if you've got like half your deck is Brotherhood and X-Men characters, this is going to be a consistent draw two. Savior of Mutant Kind. When a Brotherhood or X-Men supporting character appears on your side, Magneto gains an XP. At level 2, he still has There Are No Sides, which is his scry power, his ability to dig for more characters. He becomes a 4/9/5. Now, that stat bump is not that awesome. 9 defense is pretty okay, but 4 attack on a level 2 does feel a little weak sauce. That's just what I want. Main phase red, choose a face up Brotherhood or X-Men supporting character on your side, and put +1 counters equal to its attack on Magneto. And that right there is why his printed is a 4, because he has this ability to buff with counters. His 5 defense, or his 5 health rather, probably doesn't matter that much if you get the level up, because you're going to be able to get a, starting with a 9, you're going to be able to stack bigger attacks, and that's going to make it harder for your opponent to push through it. And at least once or twice a game, I think you can probably count on the size of his butt soaking a wound. So 5, maybe he actually has like 6 or even 7, depending upon what the attack stats are that are pretty common within the format. Unfortunately, we do have some. Unfortunately for Magneto, we do have some big number supporting characters within a lot of our formats. So it's probably going to feel a little bit more like you get one turn. So he's probably around a 6 HP is what he's going to feel like. I predict. It's fine. The thing is, they wanted to do this parody thing between Magneto and Professor X, and clearly they wanted those to be kind of the premier characters within this first set of cards. So much like Captain America and Iron Man, they had to design these characters at a level where they're going to be kind of accessible to all players. I don't necessarily think having entry level stuff in our game is a bad thing, but as a player who's been around for a while, I do tend to gravitate towards things that are a little bit more complicated. And for me personally, Magneto's fine. I don't think he's going to be tier 1. He's not terrible. At the kitchen table, I think this guy is probably where he's going to find his home, though. And it's for the people who really like that. A lot of what Versus is appealing to the people who really like the theme, the source material of this. So if you're into Krakoa and like this kind of X-Men stuff, I think this is a perfectly appropriate main character. Doesn't necessarily do it for me thematically, from a competitive sense. All right, let's look at Mystique. She is a Brotherhood affiliated 3/4/5 with range. Infiltrator, pay red during main phase, name a team. Mystique can attack enemy characters with that team this turn, even while they're protected. So this gives her both stealth and what's the ranged one called? Sniper, I think, but it's the one that lets you attack past protected characters. Level up 5, so many targets at the start of your main phase. Mystique gains 1 XP for each different enemy team. That level up could be frustrating. Like if you're playing a mono team, you're not leveling up till turn 5. That's not super likely. Most people aren't playing loyal decks. Most folks are playing mixing at least a couple of team affiliations, maybe even like three or four or five when you're looking at kind of the splash cards that you throw in there. Um, but yeah, this could be slow. Your opponent could very much have control over what characters. Like, if I have my main character's affiliation A, and I have two characters. One is affiliation A, one is affiliation B, and maybe it's better for me to attack with the affiliation B or the affiliation A character, but I decide, oh, I'll send the B one in there. He'll get stunned, and then I deny Mystique an extra XP. That's certainly the kind of calculations that your opponent could do. Anytime your opponent can fiddle with your XP, that can be bad. That can be bad news for you. Uh, at level 2, Mystique becomes a 6/7/5. She still has range, she still has Infiltrator, and she gains Deceiver. Main phase, pay yellow, name a team. Enemy characters with that team can't attack Mystique on their next turn. So at level 2, she essentially gives the ability to fog out an entire team affiliation. Again, this is going to depend a little bit on how reliant your opponent is on specific teams. Like, her level 1 kind of wants characters to, or her level up condition, I should say, wants characters to be on a diversity of teams, whereas both of her powers seem to kind of be a little bit stronger when your opponent is on a narrow band of teams. So how much mileage you get out of this may depend on uh, what your opponent's playing, but at the very least, if your opponent's playing a main character who really wants to get in there and fight, you can deny them their main character being able to declare attacks with Deceiver. And if they're playing kind of a tuck and pass style main character, whoever their biggest dude is, you can deny them attacks with, even if it's off team, you can deny them attacks with Deceiver. So overall, that feels like a decent control condition for a level up that's not like the end of the world. She's got a solid stat block. Um, I feel like if we end up seeing a format where there's a lot of people who want to hide their main characters or hide important support kit pieces in the back row, Infiltrator feels like I would rather be able to do this than have to run like Primeval Hunter in my deck. That frees up slots for other things. You don't have to worry about Bullseye, or I'm trying to think of like stealth and sniper characters, but you know what I'm saying? You don't have to worry about packing in ways to like hit that Senator Kelly. Although I guess she can't hit Senator Kelly because she has to name a team in order to do that. So not a good tool for that specific uh, card that people would hide in the back row. But the general idea is she gives you a way to sneak into the back row and hit something that's important, and she can do it simply for a red. So that could potentially free up other slots in your deck for stuff. This seems like the kind of main character that's going to be kind of skill testing for the player who's really good at picking their moment and reading their opponent's hand. I think Mystique could do really well for somebody. If you just want to slam down cards and turn right, she's probably like this again, like every other version of Mystique we have in the game. I think there's going to need to be a little bit of finesse in how you play this. Overall, seems like a decent card to me at the competitive level. Kitchen table, she's fine. Yeah, good theme, fun, decent art. Yeah. Silver Samurai. So this dude is a Brotherhood affiliated. Man, this art is great. I really like the artwork on this card. This dude's Brotherhood affiliated. 3/4/5, decently solid stat block. Tachyon field, main phase blue. When Silver Samurai strikes an enemy defender in melee combat, this turn stun it. So this works the same as like the Iron Fist punch that we saw way back in the day on the first Iron Fist in the Defender's box. When Silver Samurai stuns an enemy defender in melee combat, he gains 1 XP. So his tachyon field kind of lets you hedge against your opponent fiddling with it. Like if you know your opponent has some kind of uh, shock to the system, or well, actually shock would still work pretty well here, but like a find cover or some kind of combat trick that's going to let them boost out of the range of your 3 attack, you are still able to get the strike in. Now, just to be clear, shock wouldn't work there because if you reduce 3 to 0, he doesn't strike at all. And his stun condition is that he has to at least strike. He doesn't have to strike with enough to stun, but he's got to hit. So a shock would shut this guy down entirely, which also happened to Iron Fist back in the day. So he's got to actually hit. But even if I know that you're holding the plot twist or whatever, I can pay the blue and now I can guarantee I get that stun. Now that does mean that his level up condition might be dependent on how many blues you draw, because I'll tell you, if I'm holding find cover, uh, and you attack in with the first one and I play it, well, now you know I've got it. So going forward, you're going to have to pay that blue. And if you pay the blue and you have to pay the blue in advance because this is a main phase power, now I know you're going to get the stun no matter what I do. So now I hold my tricks back for the attacks where you don't pay the blue. So his ability to level up against shrewd players may really come down to how many blues he sees. I could see there are going to be games where this guy just can't get to his level up in 5 turns, and that's probably not good. For defense, if it's turn 5, you're probably in trouble. Most of the time, though, this is not the hardest level up in the world. At level 2, he gets advanced tachyon field. You pay 2 blues, and for the rest of the game, when Silver Samurai strikes an enemy defender in melee combat, you stun it. So this is a little hard because you obviously want to have 2 blues left over after your level up journey in order to activate the advanced tachyon field. The problem is you may have to commit a bunch of blues to getting those experience. And then by the time you get to level 2, maybe you don't see any more blues for the rest of the game. And now you don't get that. So it's a little. I could see myself playing this guy and getting a little annoyed at having to rely on my blues on level 1, and then I can't even pay for the payoff at level 2. He also gets the ancient art of Bushido. Pay yellow, draw 3 cards if Silver Samurai stunned an enemy character in melee combat this turn. So that kind of offsets some of the concerns that I was addressing with the advanced tachyon field, having a built-in way. Like what's the thing that happens to every aggro deck? You run out of gas. You end up with not enough stuff to do later in the game, and if the opponent's able to resist your initial push, a lot of times they can turn the corner and run you down instead. This ancient art of Bushido, assuming your opponent is playing cards that you can get to with your 5 attack, 595 is his level 2 stats. Assuming you can get those stuns, this is going to rebuild your hand. This is going to recharge you. This seems like a very solid aggro main character. I got a little bit of reservations about the difficulty of his level up, but nothing too severe. Overall, I think Silver Samurai is going to see some play, both competitive and kitchen table. Toad. Now, this is, I think, going to be the first guy I build out of this box. And I think there could be a couple ways to go with him, just based on seeing the level 1 in the card reveals. So, prehensile tongue. Okay. Toad has pay a red, main phase. Toad has range and +7 this turn. He's a 0/7/5. His level up condition is live to serve. When a character appears on your side, Toad gains XP equal to how much more attack it has than Toad. So you do want to sequence this in such a way that you get your recruits. Well, you have to because recruit comes before main, obviously. But you sequence this in such a way that you recruit people while he has 0 attack. Then once you go into main phase, he sticks his tongue out and he's able to actually get some work done. So there's an incentive here to play characters that have large attack values. That said, a 7/7 with range on turn 1 by itself is extremely, extremely good. Now, he will live and die on how many reds you see. If you don't see the reds, he's just a 0/7, and that's probably not good enough. But that's why you have characters in your deck with large attack values. Prehensile tongue. He keeps that at level 2, so he can still get range and +7 attack, and he also gains mighty leap. Main phase, pay a green. Toad has flight and +7 attack this turn. He becomes a 4/11/5. So 11 defense is really strong on a level 2, especially when he can probably level up turns 3-ish. Definitely by turn 4, this guy could see a level up, no question. Uh, Potentially giving himself 14 attack on top of, so attacking for 18 from the back row over the top of defenders. I like everything about this main character. The only number I don't like on this card is 5, and I don't think that's going to be that big a deal when you're starting off with a 7 and going to 11. I think Toad is potentially going to see play everywhere. This seems like a really strong main character to me. 1 cost Blob, Brotherhood affiliated 1/3/2. I do really like 1-drops that have more than 1 health. It's often frustrating for me to put a 1-drop into my deck knowing it's going to do like a thing. And it's like I'd rather have a higher value card. So I like getting a little more mileage out of my 1-drops. So I appreciate the 2 health on this guy. Blob can't be moved on enemy turns. Sure. Like, how many things are there to move characters? I mean, I guess there's more than there ever used to be. There's still not that many. Pain immunity, main phase, pay a green. Bob can't be wounded until Blob. Why did I say Bob? Until your next turn. So this is like reverse Charlie. For a lot of years, the Charlie 27 with 3 health, pay a green, become a 27/27, was out there just tanking, putting damage, stacking wounds. Blob is like the exact opposite. He's going to sit in the front row. Your opponent can't push him out of the way for any reason. So if they want to get past him, they're going to have to flight, stealth, something else to get around him. And they can't even put the wounds on him if you pay the green. Now, how often are you actually going to pay that green? I guess it depends on the overall composition of your deck if you want to devote the greens to that. But for a main character who's just looking to kind of speed bump the opponent and slow them down as much as possible, Blob is a great choice whether you throw the greens at him or not. I think the 3 defense on turn 1 is fine. Uh, on turn 2, it's fine. There's going to be a lot of cards that can get through it, but there's going to be plenty that can't. So I definitely think Blob is going to see some play in that slot. Toad. This is a Brotherhood affiliated 3/3/1 with flight and grab. I'm sorry, leap and grab. He just has flight. So leap gives him flight while he's on my turn, and grab gives him flight while it's on your turn. So this guy just has flight. I get that they can't give him flight because that would be like thematically incorrect, but that's what it is, that he has flight with way more words than is necessary. 3/3 as a stat block for a 1 drop is probably fine. I don't think this guy, you're not going to be putting Toad into your deck. So competitively, you're not going to be splashing Toad in your deck if you're not already on this team. So part of what he brings to the table is he would be an on team, like team attacker, activator for important plot twists. In a vacuum, a 3/3 with flight on one, while it's good, it's not game breaking in any kind of like important way. This isn't like a solo. This isn't a card that's going to be a tool that's necessary to enhance an entire archetype. This guy, this guy's going to be a team attacker. Whereas Blob, I think, has a little bit more versatility in terms of any main character that really wants to have something that can just get in your opponent's way. Potentially, he could find a home in that deck. Moving on to Pyro. This is a 2 cost, 2/4/1. This artwork just absolutely looks like something out of the boys. I don't know why, but like this guy looks like an unhinged evil. Well, I guess he is back anyway. Brotherhood affiliated, 2/4/1 with range. Not the world's best stat block. For the, you look at what's sort of like the premier premium aggressive 2 drop. We're looking at cards like Match, which is a 4/2. Generally speaking, I'd rather have a 4/2 on an aggressive early drop. What does he do? Pay a blue, burn an enemy front row support character so it stuns it at the end of each turn. So this guy can just grind down through. Uh, Somebody puts Blob out, you don't even have to attack him. You can just burn him down. Um, I don't know about this card. Uh, Maybe if we enter a meta where there is a early game multi-health character that's really hard to deal with, this could give you a way where you can kind of dishonestly get in there and you don't have to actually fight with your fists and go numbers to numbers. I could see this guy having some utility in that, but if that's kind of the control deck that you want to play, what else could you potentially be spending these blues on? Is your main character going to want blues? It's hard for me to see the role this guy serves because a lot of the characters that are hard to stun and have multi health are going to be higher up on the curve. So I guess, okay, this would be the deck. It would be a deck where you are planning to underdrop late in the game. So maybe like a Magneto deck where you have more lower drops because you want to make sure that you can get his experience points, or maybe even Toad to some extent, because you're trying to pack the deck with like ones and twos and lower cost characters. Maybe this guy makes the cut, knowing that maybe on turn 5 you play something plus this guy, and then you burn their 5 drop, and you don't even have to deal with him in combat while you've got your Mystique main character attacking their back row, putting wounds on the main character, something like that. I'm not super impressed with this guy. Um, I guess the theme is fine. He he's not he's not garbage, but eh, I'm probably out on Pyro. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, moving on to Quicksilver. Now, this is a card I'm very much in on. I really like this implementation of Quicksilver. Two cost, Brotherhood affiliated, out of nowhere. Oh, yeah. I think we're all excited to see some new cards, PJ, for sure. He is a 5/2/1. When you recruit Quicksilver, you may remove him from the game. If you do, starting on your next turn during any of your recruit steps, you may put him onto your side. Now, I would assume you could stack Quicksilvers off in the remove from game zone, but if you tried to bring two of them in at the same time, there'd still be a uniqueness check and they KO each other. I'm pretty sure that's how this has to work. But he basically lets you make an investment and then protect that investment until the turn where you need it. So a lot of times the problem with these one health characters low in the low drops is they come out and the turn where you really need them is like two turns down, and it's hard to keep everybody alive until you can put together that big team attack. This is money in the bank. You put this guy over here, okay? Next turn, all right, he's going to come into play. Now, in combination with that turn's recruit, I get this giant team attack. I think this guy is going to be good within Brotherhood decks. I think this guy is thematically appropriate, so there's an appeal for the kitchen table crowd there. And having the ability to pull five attack out of thin air. There's a lot of decks in competitive games where you run a very small number of low drops and you kind of skip those turns anyway because you're devoting those slots to something else higher up in the curve. This could be a card that you slot into some of these more competitive decks, not because you need a two drop, but because you want to be able to have that five attack that comes out of nowhere and helps clean up the board on your push for lethal turn or whatever. I think this is going to be a really useful card. Maybe out of this whole box, I think this guy is probably going to be one that sees a ton of play, like some of the most play in the largest variety of decks, I should say. All right, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure this is Dokken, but every time I say it, I get corrected. So if it's not Dokken, if I'm still wrong, feel free to let me know. But we're going to talk about Dokken. So this guy is a 3 cost 3/3/2. He has Berserker, so when he attacks, he gets a +1 counter put on him, and he has Violent, which when attacking supporting characters, he strikes with double his attack. This means you're paying 3 for a character that is attacking for a raw stat of 4 and a composite stat, or not composite, but a total stat of 8 into a supporting character on turn 3. Seeing 6 attack on turn 3 is sort of the bar where I say, hey, if a character can produce 6 attack on 3, this is really good for like aggressive. Not every deck needs to have the biggest pile of stats possible, but this guy is certainly a big pile of stats, is what I'm getting at. This guy breaks sort of, he goes even beyond the kind of rules that I set for myself about what, if I'm building a deck that's going to be really combat focused, the kind of stat points that I want to hit. A breakpoint of 6 on turn 3 is good enough. This guy can break 8. That's really good. Without his words, though, like on the crackback, he's just a 4/4. Now he does have two endurance or two health, so he's probably going to stick around and be able to attack for 8 twice. You pay 3, you get 2 things off your opponent's board. I mean, what's not to like? If your deck needs the ability to kill stuff on turn 3, you'd be hard pressed to do worse than this guy. I think he fits really, really well into that same kind of slot as like the Primeval Hunter, um, which frankly, the Primeval Hunter lived in that kind of early game best in class aggro card slot for too long. So it's nice to see some more competition in that area. Speaking of competition in early game aggro class of cards, we've got a 3 cost Sabertooth. I really like this art. Now, I've been with this game long enough to remember when the 4 cost villain affiliated Sabertooth was like the best 4 drop in the game. Now it's been a long road for some of those early cards, and you can no longer say that that Sabertooth, and you have not been able to say for a long time that that Sabertooth is the best 4 drop or the best anything in the game. So it's nice to see another version of a classic iconic villain, particularly in an X-Men box. Like, yeah, let's get this guy out here. And this is, of course, in the Sabretooth costume that maybe not exactly, but kind of feels like the one that I remember from my youth. So I like that even more, even though I can tell this art is way too good to have come out of the 90s. So this guy is a 4/2/2, superhuman senses, main phase, pay a red, Sabretooth gets +4, and stealth this turn. This is yet another kind of this is a competitor in the best in class aggro low drop category where Match and Primeval Hunter have reigned supreme for so long. This is producing 8 attack on turn 3. I just talked about how 8 attack on turn 3 is a really big number. 6 used to kind of be the old breakpoint that I would shoot for, so both of these cards are able to exceed that. Now, Sabretooth, in order to get to that 4 and to get his stealth, is gonna have to be supported with the investment of a location, whereas Dakin does not need the investment of a location. So depending upon what kind of deck you're doing and how hungry your deck is for your locations, I think Sabretooth is probably so he's certainly less durable in terms of his defense value and Dakin's ability to generate counters. And I think comparing these two cards to each other is useful. They clearly are filling a very similar role. So Dakin's probably going to be a little bit stickier, but only marginally so. But his value is all packed into this card. You don't need anything else to really get the value out of him. That said, stealth is a really, really, really important word. So while you do have to invest something else in Sabretooth, let's keep in mind Primeval ruled the low drops for years, and in order to get full value out of him, you needed a green, and lots of people played him, and lots of people had the green for their 2 and 3 turn plays of Primeval. This guy's a 3 drop, so that's one more turn to try to find your red. uh, I think it's kind of a toss up between which one of these cards. I think the overall peak Sabretooth is probably the overall more powerful card in terms of being that early game burst damage. Although I have to acknowledge, given time to grow, if your opponent can't deal with Dakin, this could snowball. This could get really ugly for them. Like if you could attack with this guy on 3 and on 4 and it goes unanswered, well now you're looking at a 5/5 printed, so to speak, 5/5 base stat, attacking for 11 or 12 the next time he comes in. That's huge. This guy turns into a 6 drop by turn 6 if it goes unanswered, which is really, really strong. Whereas Sabretooth does have kind of a ceiling, although I think his burst may be better. Like in terms of what can each card do on turn 3, I think Sabretooth wins that argument. But in terms of overall bang for your buck, if you can keep them around turn after turn, Dawkins certainly makes a really good case. Both of these are just excellent, aggressive, low cost cards. Uh, yeah, I don't have much criticism for either of them. I guess if you're going to play those in a casual game, like be tender with your friends. So, sometimes if you attack too aggressively, it can damage friendships. Both aggro decks and control decks have destroyed a few friendships over the years. Moving on to 4 cost Mimic, again, Brotherhood affiliated. I guess I don't have to say that. All these cards are Brotherhood. 5/5/1. Not crazy about that stat block. Not impressed with any part of it. 5/5 is pretty on turn 4. 1 health is not great. Mimic See, Mimic Do. Pay yellow for each character on your side with each of the following names. Mimic gets that effect. So if you have Angel, he gets flight and air superiority. If you have Beast, you draw 2 cards. If you have Cyclops, you get range and fast trigger for the turn. If you have Iceman, you freeze an enemy character. And if you have Marble Girl, choose a character on your side to get +10 defense. These things are not like each other. And I guess that's probably appropriate because each of these mutants has kind of a different overall power level. So paying the yellow and Mimic getting copying Marble Girl should have a more impactful and important ability than Angel. Are you ever going to assemble a deck that has these specific characters in it? I don't think you can go out of your way for this. Um, and if you do, it's probably not worth it. Obviously, Marble Girl is probably the best of the bunch in terms of raw stats. There's certainly going to be situations where all these other things are potentially important. The drawing 2 cards with Beast Sure, but I guess I don't know what low cost beast cards. I guess Evil Beast maybe. Does he count? No, because he's probably Evil Beast. Yeah, I think this card might be bad. I think yeah, I think Mimic might just be straight up like bad. And I don't know that he's so if Mimic is like your hero, your mutant that you want to build the deck around, um, the other one's way better. The Hammer affiliated, I think it is, one is much better than this. Um, yeah, I don't think I like this card. This might fall into the category of one of those things where somebody like Kid Kaiju, it's gonna be like a meme. I'm gonna bring this in a deck in a tournament, and it's gonna have all these characters, and I'm gonna lose every game, but in one game I'm gonna pay the yellow, and I'm gonna get all these powers, and everybody's gonna cheer. Yeah, I think this card's not very good. Okay, Scarlet Witch, 4 cost character, Brotherhood affiliated, 7/4/1 in range. 7, much like 6 on turn 3, 7 is kind of like the big breakpoint on turn 4 in my head. Not everybody is entitled to have their own type of analysis for cards, but for me, if I'm building an aggressive deck where I'm going to be really reliant on stats, 7 is kind of a good catch-all number where I know if I play a character on 4 that can hit for 7, I can probably hit just about everything you're going to play. That does that does change a little based on the meta. So something I like to do when preparing for a tournament is look at each drop and then filter by defense and look at what everybody's defenses are, look at what everybody's attacks are, and have those breakpoints because the breakpoints will be different in different metas. So that's something to consider. 4 mana 7/7 is sort of like my cliche overpowered character though. Okay, so we don't care about her stats though. We're here for Wanda's abilities. So Scarlet Witch, change probability as a combat. This is so dumb. As a combat with Scarlet Witch resolves, flip a coin for each enemy character who would strike. For each one who loses the flip, they can't strike. Uh, this is very reminiscent of the 5 cost domino out of the gosh, I don't even remember what box she came out of, but that the 5 cost domino. Uh, Probably resistance, maybe. It, even without change probability, the just 7 attack range on turn 4 is enough to kind of look at the card and go, well, maybe this has a home in my deck. Given that she has a chance to just never get stunned, ever, no matter what your opponent throws at her. I attack Scarlet Witch with Infinity Attack Juggernaut, and you flip a coin. Oh, I hit you, Juggernaut stunned, and I don't get hit. That seems really, really just disgusting. Yeah, I think this is probably a good card. Is this good enough that it's gonna fall into the role of like Lilith as kind of a universal 4 drop? Probably not that. Absolutely, there is more Dice Throne Season 1 and 2 character analysis on the way. In fact, I think the next one's probably either going to be Paladin or Artificer. I got all set up to do Paladin the other day, and then I was like, I think I'd rather talk about Artificer. So now I'm on the fence, but one of those two is going to be my next Dice Throne content for sure. Uh, Overall, I think this is a great 4 cost character. Being on the Brotherhood team, the kind of plot twist that she activates is going to be not the cream of the crop, generally speaking. So that's going to hurt her overall ability to be like a splash character. But we saw a character with no team affiliation, again, Lilith, see a ton of play as kind of a staple of that mid game. Now, Lilith is significantly stronger than Scarlet Witch. I'm not saying they're the same character, but if I'm building a really aggressive deck, I'm trying to put a lot of damage on the board. An attack of 7 attack, a stat of 7 attack on turn 4 is a number you can't ignore, and her ability to potentially just never die is pretty incredible. Wow. When you compare this to the Scarlet Witch we saw years ago, like the cards are just getting better in this game for sure. Moving on to Avalanche. Now, I have to criticize this art a little bit. I get that he's clearly throwing a punch, but this is like it doesn't look like he's throwing a punch in combat. This looks like he's shadow boxing, like he's doing a little workout, like a little gotta before the fight, I gotta throw some punches, some shadow punches to warm up. I don't know. I generally like more dynamic looking artwork. This one just misses the mark for me a little bit. I apologize to whoever the artist is. I'm sure if it was not this little postage stamp, it would look cooler. But in this, what we're given on this card, not super impressed with this artwork. He is a 5 cost 6/7/1 who has range. Stat block is fine. When Avalanche stuns an enemy character in combat, you may turn an enemy location face down. I, I don't think it's good enough. I just yeah, Avalanche's theme in every iteration of this character that we've seen has been attacking the resource row, but I think over the years players have kind of gotten wise to what needs to be done when you're facing these types of characters. And if we're in a meta where Brotherhood is a strong team and there's even a chance that we might see Avalanche show up, people are just not going to float locations on turn 5. Like I would rather row something else from my hand and be able to throw locations from hand to activate whatever turn 5, 6 superpower I'm trying to activate than give this guy an ability to get value. So he could kind of get stuffed that direction. He could also get stuffed on the other end where 6 attack on turn 5 is like I mean, it's not nothing. It's kind of like okay, but it's not awesome. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that if your opponent doesn't put little squishy dudes up front as speed bump type characters, if they've got if you're playing a real mid range deck that's playing a real 5 drop on turn 5, you're not stunning them with this dude. So both because I think his stats are a little bit challenged, although not the end of the world, but that his power requires your opponent to blunder into it. And we've got other cards in this set that specifically attack locations. It's going to be a theme. It's going to be on people's minds. Even casual players are going to have in their headspace, hey, there's cards in this box that can attack my locations. I might not want to float them turn after turn. I just can't see this guy getting much value. This is probably not going to be a very good 5 drop. Now, I will say, in a meta where people are trying to do lots of stuff with locations, like if Monarch's around, no, but then the stats come back into play. Like if you're trying to play him later to like snipe somebody who Monarched, uh, tough. I don't know. I'm probably not gonna put Avalanche in sleeves when he goes into my binder. Okay, 5 cost Juggernaut. Uh, gosh, he has such a cheesy grin on his face in this card art. Juggernaut is a 7/5/3. Can't say anything bad about 3 health on turn 5. That seems real good right off the bat. Headbutt. Pay a green, daze an enemy front row character that Juggernaut could melee attack. So this is kind of a pseudo stealth. You daze the character that Juggernaut's not big enough to clip, and then you clip the character that he can hit, and you get to do it turn like potentially 3 turns in a row. Oh, I'm gonna get rid of your most annoying guy. I'm gonna get rid of that Herbie. I'm gonna smash in here. I'm gonna get rid of your Daredevil or whatever the most annoying defensive problem is to solve. This guy can solve it. Knock a bunch of counters off somebody. Um, I think I think probably like casual. This is fine. This is a completely playable card. But for it to make the cut in a competitive deck, like if you're building a deck for a tournament, I think he's going to have to fill a couple of specific roles. You're going to be building a deck that wants big team attackers. 7 attack on turn 5 is fine, but paying 5 resources to have 7 attack on turn 5, 6, and 7 is pretty great. If you actually get to attack with this guy 3 times, it's a composite attack of 21. That's really good plus his headbutt ability. Now you have to have the greens to spare, of course, in order to do it. Overall, though, I feel like this guy brings a lot to the table, and he's not going to fit into every deck, but I think he's going to fit into a lot of decks. Like the theme is fine. The idea of Juggernaut headbutting somebody and then attacking, flavor wise, I really like everything that's going on with that. Altogether, I think this is a solid 5 drop. This is not a world beater 5 drop. This is not going to be a meta breaking 5 drop, but this is totally playable. And in specific decks, again, particularly decks that care a lot about getting aggressive decks that care about getting a lot of stats out early and where team attacks really matter. If you're on Brotherhood and you want big stats early, and I think a lot of these Brotherhood decks probably do, this guy could slot into that. Now, are you going to be able to fit this guy into your Magneto deck where you need to have a bunch of low cost Brotherhood and X-Men dudes in order to level up Magneto? That's getting to be a little bit dicier. And if a lot of these Brotherhood decks end up being more focused on being willing to underdrop and flood the board, try not to say swarm in this game because that's an actual keyword. If a lot of these decks end up wanting to flood the board early, it, is this 5 drop what you want at the top of your aggro curve? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. I mean, he's so durable. You pay the 5 recruit, and then he's there for like 3 turns potentially, barring lethal. Maybe. Yeah. I'm lukewarm on Juggernaut as a aggro deck top end, but overall the flavor and theme, like the casual fan in me, loves the card. 6 cost Mystique, Brotherhood affiliated, 5/10. That's a lot of numbers. 5/10 with range, 1 health. Infiltrator, this is the same as the main character, right? Yes, it's exactly the same as the main character. So this is a 5/10 that basically has stealth that you have to pay for. Um, I don't think I like it. I don't 6 cost to be able to 6 cost plus you pay a red to be able to have a stealth 5 attack once. Uh, I mean, I guess I shouldn't call it stealth because she could do it from range. But with 10 defense, who cares about the range? You're probably not gonna get clipped back anyway. Yeah, I don't. This card doesn't make any sense to me. Like her stats should be flipped. Like to make this good, I think it needs to be a 10/5, and then we're talking about a card here. I don't think this is a card. Gosh. Well, fortunately, if you're a Mystique fan, her main character seems very playable. Not crazy broken, but very playable, and particularly in the hands of a skilled player who knows when to deploy her resources. And that's good, because I don't think you're going to play this card. 6 cost Silver Samurai, Master Strategist. Excuse me. Okay. Master Strategist. When Silver Samurai appears, you may move an enemy character to its front or back row, except for Blob, I guess. Um, Yeah, that could be really good. That could be really impactful. I mean, we saw during the Spider, what was it called? Second Chance, right? Yeah, Second Chance arc, how powerful Spider Carnage was and how many decks were throwing that around. And that you had to pay a red on top of throwing a couple recruit points into getting that dude out on those later turns, and that was worth it. This is a decently statted 6 drop, an 8/7/2. I mean, those aren't crazy stats, but I think 8/7 is fine when you couple it with 2 health. Like that's pretty good. If this guy was 1 health, 8/7 wouldn't be good enough, in my opinion, on turn 6. But with the rest of the words on this card, overall, spoiler alert, this card's really good. He also has Combat Master, which makes it so enemy players can't play plot twists when he's in combat. So eh, the thing about Combat Master is it is amazing, but there's always going to be those turns where you attack and your opponent like, oh look, I didn't have any plot twists anyway, and then it's like, oh well, that feels lame. But it's such a good it's such a good keyword. Don't think it gets enough respect for how strong it is and how impactful it can be in games. Combat Master is huge. Master Strategist, just a free, like we saw an ability similar to this on the 8 cost Omega Storm. So messing with your opponent's formation is really strong. Being able to do it for free and being able to attack for 8 where your opponent can't use any combat tricks, so you can kind of guarantee you're going to have safe attacks. Altogether, this is a complete package. Really, the only thing the Silver Samurai doesn't have is like a blowout, ridiculous attack stat. Like, if he was like a 12/5 with all the rest of these words, this would be like the perfect card. So this is a very solid 6 drop, but not a completely insane like blowout aggro 6 drop. But I could see this being the top end of an aggro deck, maybe a little more than Juggernaut, mainly because of Combat Master. Like if you're really relying on combat, you can get hosed by the wrong plot twist. And towards the end of the game, like turn 6, those are the turns where your aggro decks really want to be able to declare safe attacks. This guy gives you a safe attack all in one package. That seems really good. Um, Now, if you're a fan of Silver Samurai from the comics, I don't know what to tell you because I don't know that I've ever read a comic that he was in. So I don't know if this is a good representation of the character from the comics. That's probably not true. I probably have. I'm just being cheeky. Okay, seven cost alpha. Wow, I hate this art. I hate this art so much. Oh my goodness. So I know Marvel kind of gives them a limited selection of art to choose from, but has anybody seen the first episode of the old like Captain Kirk Star Trek? Right? Okay. So setting aside this, gosh, I don't like this art. But what does the card do? So he's a 10-8-1 with flight and range. Those stats are probably okay on 7 because of the range. He can hang in the back, and you can get really good value out of that 10 attack. Super intelligence, pay yellow. Each enemy player has 2 less recruit points on their turn. No, I'm never doing this. I'm never doing this. I'm never gonna. Okay, maybe if what I'm trying to do is play a Brotherhood deck where I'm hyper focused on putting the biggest attack value, just cannons on my opponent every turn, maybe the 10 attack range is enough to get me to be willing to put this into my deck. And especially if I have maybe like a flying main character who can block for this guy, so I don't have to worry about the one health quite so much. Maybe if I check all those boxes, I could see fielding this in a deck. You will never play this for the super intelligence. I don't see any reason to ever play this for the super intelligence. Putting your opponent 2 less recruit points. You can't do it until turn 7. Um, I guess in the world where you're an aggro deck and you're trying to like hold the lid on your opponent's top end, where you know they're going to be able to blow you out, but it doesn't even hold the lid on it, just puts it off for like 2 turns. I don't think so. I don't. I don't think for a 7 drop for that stage of the game, I don't think paying a yellow to mess with your opponent's next turn is what you want to be doing at that stage of the game. I guess, and if you want to fit this card into that kind of like control shell where you're trying to set up and make the game go longer, then I don't think his stats make sense. Like I don't actually understand this card. Yeah, I don't think I'm in on alpha. Okay, Magneto, 7 costs, flight range 9-11-2. I already like everything about this card better than the other 7 drop. Main phase, metal with metal, pay a blue, rearrange any number of equipment. Now, they said on the stream, Upper Deck, that you can also use this to rearrange machines. So if you've got any of the Omega machines or like the machine in play. Your opponent could steal it by using Magneto. That's pretty good. The thing is, any format where we are going to be seeing a lot of equipment where this guy is legal, I think people are probably going to be like ready for it. And a lot of times with equipment, you play it, you get your value out of it, and it's like not the end of the world when it goes to the KO pile. If you know Magneto is going to be coming down for your opponent, eh, how much of that equipment is going to be sticking around? Sure, there's going to be some opportunities where you're going to be able to steal something or rearrange something. Um, I think if you want to get value out of this card, it's going to have to rely on you bringing the equipment to the table, though. Doing something like putting chimichangas on a character earlier in the game, building up the +1 counters, then passing those chimichangas to Magneto or your main character or somebody else. Something like that feels okay. Stat wise, I think 9-11 is like not the greatest 7 drop stats we've ever seen, but 9-11 too with flight and range altogether. I like what this card is doing in like kind of the most basic sense of being a chunky blocker who could shoot from the back if he needs to. This could be a really solid team attacker for a Brotherhood deck that needs team attackers. He's going to stick around for 2 turns with the 2 health. And the metal with metal, I mean, that's gravy. Like in some games, it's not going to be worth anything. In some games, you're maybe going to be able to steal an isosphere or something cool. I don't know. Um, if we see a format where there are like really important equipments, like going back to the second chance format where there were machines everywhere, your opponent having the ability to just yoink your machine on turn seven is certainly something to think about. So I know the last midwinter, the Chitari equipment, a lot of equipment was everywhere because everybody was playing Loki. Perhaps in that kind of environment, this guy looks even better. But overall, stat wise, he's fine. He's fine. I'm not crazy about him, but he's fine. Always attack. Brotherhood. Any combat. Choose a character on your side to get +3, +1. So there's a tiny defense buff, and it's 3 attack. 3 attack has always been kind of the minimum that I want to see out of a plot twist. If you're able to give yourself +3 attack, that usually is going to be enough that you're going to be able to reach up to the next level on the curve. And since you can play this in any combat, you could also potentially use this to pick off an incoming attacker who thought they were safe. Overall, this is a really strong plot twist. You compare it to things like Shock to the System, which gives a character. That's not what you compare it to. You compare this to things like Open Fire, which only gives +2 attack. That definitely saw play. Being that this is on the Brotherhood team, and this team has kind of famously struggled with plot twists and other things, I think this is a really solid plot twist to give them. This is a great tool. This is a card that I think if we saw this way back when Brotherhood first premiered, it would have been like a 2-1. I think Super Awesome Games has gotten more and more willing to give us bigger numbers on both our characters and our plot twists, and I think that's great. I think Always Attack is a good plot twist. Pierce combat. If this is a melee combat, choose a character on your side to get ferocious and +2 this combat. We've seen with the symbiote arc how powerful ferocious off a plot twist can be. It can really mess people up when they don't see it coming. This gives you basically an open fire plus a vigilante justice. Again, everything I have to say about the Brotherhood team kind of still stands. There's still some weaknesses on this team, but one of the weaknesses they've had for a long time is the lack of quality plot twists. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think Always Attack and Fierce Pierce are both the kinds of plot twists you want to see if you're trying to encourage players to be able to underdrop characters, kind of swarm the board a little more. Like if you want Magneto to work and you're packing your deck with a bunch of like ones to try to make sure you satisfy his level up condition, these are the kind of plot twists you need to be able to have access to make up the difference in the like stat to stat combat game of versus. I need to be able to give myself +3 attack to be able to get up the curve and hit those 5 cost characters. I need to be able to give my guys ferocious so they're a little bit harder for you to get cleared off the board, and I can make attacks that I turn an attack that should have been a trade into a value trade instead. This is exactly what you want to do when you're underdropping. Feels very strong. All right, burn it down. So there's 2 of these mutant loyalty plot twists. Put this in your deck only if every card with a team affiliation is a Brotherhood or X-Men. Build phase, turn 2 enemy basic locations with different names face down. I don't think your opponent is ever going to give you the opportunity to clip 2 locations with this. If it's a format where this card exists and you're sit down with Brotherhood and X-Men characters in your deck, especially if it's a format where we get like restricted to only playing Brotherhood and X-Men stuff. People are going to know that this is around. They are not going to float their locations. You're probably not going to get value out of this card. The only place where this is going to work is when people don't see it coming. If I can set up my board to make sure you don't get value out of Burn It Down, then you're not going to get value out of Burn It Down. And there's not really anything you can do about it. And at that point, it's just dead slots in your deck, in which case you're probably not going to run it because limiting your deck to just Brotherhood and X-Men means you're closing yourself off to whatever tech drops are available within whatever format you happen to be building for. Generally speaking, every format where Brotherhood and X-Men have been legal, there have been cards that are not Brotherhood or X-Men that are very much worth playing. Giving up all of those cards just to be able to maybe flip a couple locations face down, generally speaking, I don't see it happening, but give it some time. A few years down the road, when people forget that this is a card, there are going to be people who I think get clipped in high profile situations by being caught by surprise by this. Out of these 2 mutant loyalty plot twists, I think Burn It Down is the one that probably has more legs, but I'm pretty lukewarm on both of them. Reprint of Asteroid M. I said before that I'm not. Whoa, wait, what's this? Oh man, I didn't even know what these were. Okay, back on track here. Asteroid M. I said before, as a longtime player of the game, a person who buys two copies of most of these expansions, I have all the Asteroid M's that I need, but I understand we need the game to survive and thrive. If I want to keep getting cards, then new players have to be able to have access to cards, and there are going to be times where they're going to reprint a box, and you gotta make the box playable out of the box. Like the giant size promise is if I buy this, me and my friend can sit down and we've got all the cards we need to build some decks and play some verses. And that just means we need to have a reprint of Asteroid M and Xavier's Mansion over here. Um, it is what it is. Maybe call it growing pains. There's times where Upper Deck does stuff specifically for the established player base, and they really do like old player retention, like cool things for us, people in that bucket. This is for something that they had to do for newer players. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, hey, if I choose to look at it that if the situation is that there's so many newer people coming to versus that the game is growing enough that not everybody has those establishing sets from back in the day, and not only that, they can't find. That's good. That's a good thing for our game. We spent a lot of years where a lot of versus cards were sitting on the box at local games or sitting on the shelf at local game stores collecting dust. If we don't live in that world anymore, that's good for the game. I want to see the game thrive. If the way I have to pay for that is 8 slots in my 200 card set get devoted to cards I already have in my binder, all right, it's fine. Uh, so just to quickly look at, I don't know what these secondary mutations are. So the new art on the basics, it feels like there's fewer basics. Don't they normally give us 8 of each color in each brick? Oh, okay. So if they're only giving us 4 of each color in each brick, then I think they actually did. I might be I might be wrong. It's been a while since I've opened a 200 card box, but I thought with Civil War each half had 8 of each basic. And if that was the case, then actually we have more slots that are devoted to. Oh, well, at least some of that is right here. But either way, the art looks fine. I actually am a fan of new art on basic locations and playing with different stuff over time. So I'm kind of fine with that. Although I would, of course, prefer boxes that are just all new cards all the time, but that's probably unreasonable. So I want to check here. Okay, there are 2 more secondary mutation cards. So I'm going to tackle this before we get into the X-Men cards. So these are both X-Men and Brotherhood affiliated, and they're mutant loyalty. So again, you have to have a deck that's only Brotherhood and X-Men characters. Build phase, choose a character on your side. They randomly get one of the powers they don't have for the rest of the game. Flight, range, berserker, dodge, ferocious, or lethal. Um, okay, so I guess these are all the same. It's weird that they split them into the 2 bricks the way they did, but I don't know anything about card collation in terms of packaging, so there's probably a reason. Um, no, no. This isn't going to be good enough to make me want to play Mutant Loyalty. If I so I get to choose the character, but I don't get to choose the power. And there's only 4 of these, so it's not like you're going to be stacking Flight, Range, Berserker, Dodge, Ferocious, and Lethal all on one character. Are there 6 there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that makes sense. So you roll a d6. So at least mechanically speaking, in a tournament, if I play this card, I roll a d. If I get a 6, oh my guy's lethal. Um, I like that it's in the build phase, so you know what you're doing before, like when you're doing your recruits and stuff, because that could, depending upon how this card plays out, it could impact how you form, it could impact who you recruit. There's a lot of stuff there. If you had to wait until the main phase to do this and you don't know what you've got, this is completely unplayable. By virtue of it being in the build phase, I can kind of see a window where, okay, maybe, can this attack main characters or attach to? Oh, yeah, and it is for the rest of the game. So this could attach to your main character. Um, I don't know. I mean, the idea of giving your main character ferocious, lethal berserker, that does sound pretty attractive. But you have to actually draw these individual copies, and then you have to get those dice rolls, and maybe you put range on a guy who already has. Well, no, it's got to be a power they don't already have. So you couldn't. Oh, so that could actually make it less random if you're targeting a character that already has flight and range, you're actually only rolling a d4 to see what power you get. So that does make it a little better. Uh, I don't know. If this card didn't say mutant loyalty on it, I'd say let's give it a shot. Let's see where we're at. But the fact that you can only play with Brotherhood and X-Men characters and it's so random. I don't know. At my kitchen table, hanging out with my kid, I'm gonna love that card. I'm totally gonna play it and have fun with it in that context. At a tournament table, I don't think you want to be in the situation where your tournament life is on the line, depending upon whether you get lethal or not, and then the dice roll doesn't go your way. That feels like a bad situation. Okay, Banshee. Not a character I expected to see get the MC treatment, especially since I already know there is not a Nightcrawler in here, but that's a conversation for another day, I guess. Okay, Banshee. 3/4/5 with flight. Stats, it's fine. Bold Yeller. Any combat, pay a blue, daze an enemy character in the combat. Sonic Boom, level up 4. When an enemy character gets turned face down, Banshee gains an XP. So if you just have to attack with him and get stuns with him, you could level up on turn 4. 3 attacks, probably not going to get that done for you though. So the ability to pay a blue and daze a character out of combat is probably good. That it also gives him the flexibility of 3 doesn't have to be good enough to get it done. Even if your opponent is trying to be clever and play characters that Banshee can't stun to avoid his level up condition, Bold Yeller gives you the ability to satisfy that level up condition without it, although it does make him very dependent on his stream of blues. At level 2, he still retains Bold Yeller. He becomes a 6/9, which is a pretty big stat jump. Uh, Sonic Screech, main phase, red, put 4 -1 counters on an enemy character. If it's equipped, stun it instead. I don't think you really care. Like the equipped part is icing on the cake. If you get it, great. That's really cool. But otherwise, you're taking somebody who's got 10 defense down to where you can hit him with your 6. Uh, this is like a mini Thunderbolt from Thor. This is like attacking with match. There's lots of examples throughout the history of versus latent mutation where putting 3 or 4 -1 counters on a character has been really, really good. I don't think level 2 Banshee is any exception to that. This is very strong. Level up feels doable. There's probably going to be some draws, some matchups where his level up is a little harder than others. Your opponent does have a little bit of control over it in that they can choose to like what characters they recruit, the speed at which they depending upon their main character. Like if your opponent is Magneto and they just have to put a bunch of one drops out there to get their level up, you're sitting pretty. It's not going to be like that every game, but I think often enough, most games, your opponent wants to play stuff. And if your opponent's playing stuff, turns 1, 2, 3, you can expect to be able to stun it with your 3 attack potentially, and Bold Yeller sort of fills the gap for the places where you can't. Overall, this feels like a very doable, fair main character. I kind of put this into the same category as Mystique. I do think this is probably going to have some legs in the tournament scene. Doesn't strike me as being like a totally broken or like an immediately tier 1 character, but yeah, it's fine. Probably a mid-range deck to go with it. Yeah, it seems decent. Cyclops, a character who never gets good versus cards. So let's see what he got this time. Level 1, range 4/3/5. Not great stats for a level 1, but kind of thematically appropriate for Cyclops. Unleash Optic Beam. Main phase, pay a blue. Cyclops strikes with double his attack while ranged attacking this turn. When a character attacks, Cyclops gains an XP. He needs 9 to level up. So you're going to have to play some lower cost characters to satisfy that level of condition. And I don't know what his level 2 does, but you don't want to stay as a 4/3. There's no game where you want to stay as a 4/3. This is not going to be one of those characters where you can sort of not care about his level up. And because of that, you have to get characters on the board, and they have to be able to attack. And your opponent can kind of play around this. If I just sit with my main character, you got to be able to team attack. Because if your guys aren't on the same team, and I'm kind of sitting with my main character while I'm satisfying my level up condition or making sure whatever my recruits are getting trade stuns, so that way there's nothing there for you to attack. You might only get 1 attack on your turn. If you're only going to get 1 attack, you want to be able to throw everything that you can at it to capture that experience. So I think you probably need to play low cost X-Men characters in this guy's deck to make it work. What do you get when it pays off? He becomes a 8/6/5 with range. Uh, Fine. I think his attack probably should have been a little higher, given the rest of the. Well, let me read the rest of the card. Unleash Optic Beam, strikes with double his attack. Okay, yeah, so he's going to get the 16 still, so he retained his blue power. The 8's probably fine. Battlefield Commander, ready any number of other characters on your side. Yeah, so this fits right into the same kind of thing that his level 1 does. This is what I like to see. I would like to see more main characters that really have this kind of synergy across their levels. It's frustrating to me, cards like She-Hulk, where she encourages you to dump all the plot twists out of your hand to get to her level up, and then once you're leveled up, you have to have plot twists to be able to play to get her payoff. Another card we looked at earlier with the blues. I can't remember which character it was though. Uh, Silver Samurai. Yeah, Silver Samurai. His level up kind of wants you to be able to spend that blue, but then his level 2 really wants you to have two more blues to spend, and that kind of is pulling you in anti-synergistic directions. Cyclops, on the other hand, is clearly like his level up wants you to recruit dudes, and you want to be able to attack. So you want to have multiple things out in on the field in order to facilitate his level up condition. And at level 2, he gets a little beefier, and all of those things you recruited to facilitate his level 1 level up condition now has the ability to swing twice. This is an excellent card. Cyclops is not a character I'm a huge fan of, but this is a fantastic card. I think this, if you're a fan of Cyclops, you're going to love playing this at the kitchen table, and I think you need to be ready to see this in competitive play. You couple this kind of stuff with like Devil Slayer, who can attack people when they're face down, and now all of a sudden, even though your characters are down, now all my people are ready and I go to attack into your main character some more. This feels like there could be a machine gun combo here where after all the pieces are set in place, you could like copycat Devil Slayer, stun the main character with somebody, pay the red, copycat, like Devil Slayer, like, so if I Devil Slayer copycat, I stun them the first time, Devil Slayer, that's 3 wounds, then ready everybody, Devil Slayer copycat again for a total of 5 wounds in one turn. I don't know what the specifics of that would be, but it doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility. This guy feels good. Marvel Girl, aka Jean Grey and Phoenix. She is a 5/1. Get out of here. I don't want main characters that can be killed with a single +1 counter. Like, I don't feel like that's a controversial take. Oh, wow. Okay, so bad start. Let's start again. She is a 5/1 with flight and range. She has 5 health. Not great. Telekinetic shield. Any combat, pay a yellow, choose a defender on your side to get +10 this combat. Okay, so she can defend herself or other people in play. Level up 2, when a defender on your side survives combat, Marble Girl gains an XP. So she has 1 defense, but you're going to want to dump your yellows into protecting your other characters in order to get this level up condition. I'm guessing she keeps the shield at level 2, but are you going to have yellows left? Oh, she levels up into a 2 defense. Uh, okay, well, at level 2, she becomes a 10/2 with flight and range, keeps telekinetic shield, and gains telekinetic weapon. Any combat, pay a green, choose an attacker on your side to get +10. Uh, it's just too resource heavy. Maybe if you can figure out a way to fit like a Wyatt Wingfoot into this engine to facilitate additional card draw and feed these beasts, but you're going to have to be dumping yellows into keeping supporting characters alive at level 1 just to get to level 2. But then even at level 2, you're still going to have to be dumping yellows into keeping her alive, as well as, well, now you have the ability to just produce a burst of 10 damage on the board kind of at will. Sure, that's good, but I mean, so now you got to draw greens and yellows and characters to play this stuff on. I mega not interested in playing that character. Professor X. So a dream worth having is basically the exact same as the Magneto. Uh, Power, pay yellow, reveal 4 cards, put all the Brotherhood and X-Men that you reveal into your hand. Very strong. Probably draw a couple cards most of the time when you activate it. Assuming you build your deck around this, we'll probably draw 2 cards most times you activate it. Once you play four Brotherhood or X Men characters, you go from a 1/6, which is not a terrific stat block, 1/6 with range, 5 health. You become a 3/12 with range and 5 health. Now that 12 defense, that is substantial. And you could potentially level up on like turn three if you go one drop, one drop, one drop, and then three. Yeah, so that will give you your four experience. So you're looking at 12 defense on turn three. That could be really hard for a lot of decks to deal with. He still has a dream worth having. Pay yellow, reveal four cards, get all the Brotherhood X Men, and a dream worth fighting for. Main phase, pay a red, choose a Brotherhood or X Men supporting character on your side, and then put +1 counters equal to its attack on another Brotherhood or X Men supporting character on your side. Um, I guess depending upon the attack of your characters, that could be worth doing. Like that could be pay a red, put 7+1s on somebody, and Might Makes Right is pay a card and a green and put four on somebody, and that card has seen a ton of play. Uh, you got to be able to have the characters that have the big attacks. You also have to pack this deck with a lot of characters in order to make sure that your dreams worth having proc and that you hit those. Basically you want to hit three one drops across your first two turns. So you're probably looking at like 12 one drops. And if there's 12 one drops in the deck, are you going to have that character with that big attack once you hit level two to be able to take advantage of it? Uh, I mean, this is a lot more proactive and interesting of a character than the Professor X we got in the base box, and it's a lot more playable than the Professor X we got in New Mutants. But overall, this ain't it. I don't think this is. I don't. Part of this is I'm not the world's biggest X-Men fan. The level of excitement I had for Civil War was huge because Captain America was my guy. So if Professor X is your guy, I can totally understand being a little annoyed at my lukewarm take on this card. Mechanically speaking, if I was going to play either of these two, I think Magneto is the better of the two, and I don't think it's that close, really. Uh, I do like this Professor X a lot more than the base box Professor X. And that's the only one that's really been playable for us. So it's cool to see the character get refreshed. I think it's cool that they did this symmetry between the X-Men and the Brotherhood, and they're doing kind of similar things like what they did with Iron Man and Captain America in the Civil War box. Uh, Kind of like what happened with Iron Man and Captain America, making the marquee characters really new player friendly and doing kind of like basic things does kind of dampen my excitement level like a little bit because I'm not really I don't think I'm the target market for this card. I think this box is for people who love X-Men and want to be able to just dive into playing Professor X versus Magneto with very little overhead, similar to people diving into Civil War playing Iron Man versus Captain America without necessarily having to be like really deep versus players. So knowing that this set was coming out around the time of year when Upper Deck tends to release their like new player friendliest stuff, which let's be clear, that makes sense. As we're going into convention season, having the new player friendliest stuff being the new hotness from a business standpoint is exactly what we want to make the game accessible to new players. Um, it's just not the card for me. That's what this comes down to. He's fine. Like, he's not bad, but I don't think Professor X is going to be like topping any tournaments either. This power just there's too many ways to answer +1 counters, and you might even have a hard time getting a good, impressive stack of +1 counters based on some of the other things the deck demands from you. So, Storm 345. Now, my guess is that this card is going to fit kind of the same role as Mystique did on the Brotherhood team. This is going to be like a really solid mid-rangey card that is going to have legs in the tournament table. Let's see. Master Thief, pay a red. Each enemy player discards a random card. Random? Oh gosh. Yeah, if that was letting me pick the card that I was going to discard. I don't know if it's worth the red necessarily, but making it random. Oh, dude, you can hose people, make them throw away their like one of a kind combo activators. Like that's gross. Uh, 345 was her stat line. Mistress of the Elements. When a basic location appears on your side, she gains an XP. Oh, and it's not limited to any. It's any basic. It's just a basic. That's a very doable. That's a very, very doable level up condition. Okay, what do we get though? Oh no, look at all those. Okay, she becomes a 6/7 with flight. Not the world's greatest stat increase for level 2, but maybe okay. She could potentially level up as early as turn 4, maybe a little earlier if you're doing something like with Mirage to cheat out an extra basic a little bit early, which would actually fit this deck really well because you could play for anybody. I've mentioned Mirage a couple times. She's a much older X-Men card. When you play her, you get to take a basic from your hand and put it into play. When she gets stunned, you have to take a basic from your own, put it back in your hand. So this card actually works really well with that because if I Mirage out on turn 3, I level up my Storm, and I've got my 4 resources, and I immediately pay all 4 of them because this requires a blue, a yellow, a green, and a red to create weather for the rest of the game. Now you can stun my Mirage. So what? All my cards are face down. You don't get a bounce one. That could be really good. This card might be good. What's the weather do? Blizzard, at the start of each enemy player's main phase, freeze a character on their side. Do they get a pick or do I get a pick? The way this is worded, I think I get a pick, which is gross. That's really gross. So it's like a free Iceman activation every turn for the rest of the game, potentially starting as early as turn 3. It's so silly. Fog. Enemy defenders can't strike. It's pretty decent. Cyclone. Enemy characters lose and can't gain flight. I mean that if Storm had a bigger defense, that could be a really big deal. Thunderstorm. At the start of each enemy player's build phase, put one -1 counter on each character on that side. Okay, so real quickly, Thunderstorm's probably the worst. Cyclone is probably not where you want to be either. Probably if you do this twice in a game, and that's asking a lot to get a 4 location suite 2 times. It's not unheard of. I mean, we back in the day with Infinity Gauntlets, we heard of people double activating that. Uh, but almost for sure, it seems like either Blizzard or Fog is going to be the way to go. Depending upon how the stats line up in your deck, taking away their best attack every turn is really really strong, making it so defenders can't strike. If you have a bunch of characters that have big attacks and low defense values, maybe Fog would be the better. But between those two, I could also see arguments for Cyclone if you are facing a really flight heavy deck, or if you have cards in your deck that are printed with air superiority. Um, Wait, no. I might need to refresh air. I think air superiority is the one where if they don't have flight, they can't hit you. But I might be wrong. That might be if they do have flight, they can't. Either way, I think Thunderstorm and Cyclone are probably the lowest value. Thunderstorm, I don't know that you'll ever do that, like for any reason. Maybe if you, ooh, what if you built her with a bunch of the like Omega machines and you had like the -1 counter thing going? I'll leave that deck to Jason Roosevelt. He's the -1 counter guy. I think this Storm is good. A little bit of a bummer that she loses Master Thief. You're probably not ever going to use Master Thief, honestly. If you're trying to get for a set of 4 locations to be able to actually use her level 2 Weather Witch power, you're probably not going to, unless you have access to 3 reds early in the game, which is not a good sign. I'd be a little surprised that you'd be throwing reds at this unless you're guaranteed 2 activations with Weather Witch. Probably a lot of your game plan is going to be trying to make sure you can get guarantee 1 and push for 2. I suspect the games where Storm gets to Weather Witch twice, you win with an extremely high rate. Uh, yeah, I like that main character a lot. Bishop, X-Men affiliated 1/1/1. That's not good. Range, okay. Bundle of energy. When Bishop appears, put a +1 counter on him for each blue location on every side. You're not going to play this card. Nobody, you're not. Get out of here. Uh, I don't think you can rely on your opponent for the blues. There's a chance they're not even playing them. If they are playing them, they're probably using them, so they're not going to stay face up. On your side, in this meta where we have cards like Tear It Down and Avalanche, are you going to be camping out with your locations face up to try to juice your one drop? I guess maybe early game you play a few blues and then you have a one drop that can come out as like a 3/3. No, no. I think he's bad. I don't think anybody plays that bishop. If you're a bishop fan, this is not the bishop you play. Okay, Jubilee. I do like this artwork. She's doing stuff. She's got her lights flashing. She looks kind of like angry. Like, yeah, all right, I like it. One cost 3/2. Take lessons, Bishop. That's an appropriate stat for a one drop. 3/2/1 with range. Enemy characters have -1 while in combat with Jubilee. Yeah, no, you're never gonna play this. Maybe in a limited format where you're building decks out of just this box, she's definitely gonna be the X-Men one drop that you're gonna play over that bishop for sure. But like in a wide format where you can play like literally any other one drop, or potentially no one drops, uh, it, I guess Professor X and Magneto are probably gonna play some of these cards because they have to get their level up conditions. But overall, I don't think she makes the cut. She's not terrible. If you like Jubilee as a character, thematically this does fit her character. It just the impact isn't big enough. The numbers aren't big enough. Um, yeah, yeah. Maybe as a team attacker, just to force down the that's nah. She's probably not good enough. All right, Blink. Now I have to say, there's part of my heart that does not like this character because of what Blink did to Old Versus. Uh, Old versus players will remember when the last Marvel set came out and ruined everything, and some of the cards that ruined everything and broke all the balance in that game were Blink cards. So I'm automatically ready to say this is OP and has to be nerfed. No, I'm kidding. All right, so she's a one cost, or sorry, two cost, 1/6 with one health, displacement field, any combat, pay a red. As this combat resolves, each enemy character strikes itself instead of a character on your side. Uh, yeah, and she's only cost two. So for those of us who have been around for a while, think about way back in the day when decks ran Iron Fist and Reds just because Iron Fist could guarantee a stun. Even if he couldn't come by it honestly, his Kun Lao punch or whatever it was called could make sure that enemy character turns face down. Now, if we enter a meta where a lot of the best characters are lower attack than defense, she's not going to be very good. Like her stat block of 1/6 is terrible for her effect. But we've looked at a lot of cards over the course of this that are 7/5, 4/2. Does this supporting character? Each enemy character. This affects main characters too. Uh, I guess it only affects Marvel Girl, right? All the other ones have good stats. Uh, this is very good. This is very, very, very good. This feels like a power that should be on like a five drop. Instead, it's on a two drop. And these are decks. There's a lot of incentive within this box to build decks that are willing to underdrop to flood the board with a bunch of characters. I think she can fit into a bunch of decks. She's going to be able to answer problems. It's not going to be good in every deck, and I mean we don't know what the meta is going to shake out to be. It may be that the best cards in each drop at the next meta we go into are all cards like her that have a lower stat than attack stat than a defense stat. In which case, her ability is kind of useless. But largely speaking, there's always going to be some players who like aggro, and aggro players are always going to be players that gravitate towards cards that have higher attack than defense stats, which means Blink is potentially a new type of Iron Fist. You play her, you run her into somebody, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to stun your 24/24. And there's really nothing you can do about it because it's that character striking themselves. That's gross. Yeah. I guess you'd have to be careful playing her with Weather Witch, because if you fog, enemy defenders can't strike, and now they wouldn't be able to strike themselves. You could blow up your own. your own tech. So that'd be something to consider in how you build that deck. Okay. Iceman, he is a 2 cost 2/1/2 with range. I mean, as much as I really like seeing more hit points on cards, 2/1 on is that the same stats as his one drop? I think it is. Or it might be a 1/2. Either way, that's bad stats for a 2 cost. Icebreaker, main phase, pay a blue, freeze an enemy location, exhaust it, and it can't ready on its next turn. Exhausted resources don't provide recruit points. So you're devoting your entire turn to recruit to get this guy who's way understated, plus a location to put your opponent, force your opponent to underdrop by 1 next turn. And maybe you get to do it twice. So a lot of times when we think about ramp, we're thinking about getting ahead of our opponent by 1. Like Nick Fury from the base box was a card that didn't see a ton of play, but it wasn't like an end of the world exchange. Like the idea of putting out this Nick Fury, paying a resource, and basically getting up on your opponent. But that's for the rest of the game. I'm up on my opponent by 1. This is 1, or maybe if I turn this into a 3 card combo, 2 turns where I go up on my opponent. Is that going to be sufficient breathing room to really like pull away and run away with the game? I don't think so. And like, are you going to put blues in your deck for this? Probably not. Probably if you're running blues, you want to do something more impactful than anything this guy's offering. I think it's okay that we got a bad Iceman card because we've already gotten like one of the most prolific one drops the game has ever seen was the base box Iceman, and I'm so sick of seeing that guy. This art is way better than that Iceman for sure. But I maybe I'm not valuing anti-ramp enough. I kind of crapped on alpha as well a little bit. Um, Maybe a deck that goes Iceman into much later alpha slows the enemy down enough that you can really take advantage of that stuff artificial stumble that you're making them take. So this is one of those cards that I think actually I don't know who this card's for because I don't think it's good enough for competitive players. But this is the kind of thing that if you do this at the kitchen table with your friends are going to get mad at you. So this card is like just like scummy and like just mean enough that it probably won't see play at the kitchen table because when I'm playing with my friends, this isn't the kind of stuff I do. I want to make big monsters and like I want to attack, I want to engage. I don't like when I'm playing controlly like stuff that really hates on my opponent, disruption heavy stuff. That's when I'm testing for a tournament. And I don't think this is good enough for a tournament situation and it's too mean for a casual situation. So I don't know who that card's for. Nobody. That card keeps drink rings off my table. That's what that card's for. Okay, Havoc, 3 cost X-Men affiliated, 4/5/1 with flight and range. That's pretty solid for a 3 drop. I know I went on at some length about how 6 attack is the break point that I really like to see with my 3 drops, and that's true. But this guy's not going for maximum attack stat. This isn't like seeking the break point. This is just a solid all around body. He can fly, he can shoot, and he's a 4/5. He's not crazy in the stat like it's not way overstated. It's not perfect, but that's a really solid 3 drop card. Energy conversion. When a character on your side uses a superpower, put a +1 counter on it. When an enemy character uses a superpower, put a -1 counter on it. So we look at the disruption that's available in photographic, and we're looking at a 3 drop like Mordo, who just like you don't get superpowers at all. And over here in illustrated, you get a -1 when you use a superpower. Um, I don't think energy conversion is a very good keyword. I do think this guy will probably see play in some decks, though, especially if you have main characters that want to use superpowers, because you could actually turn him into a 5/6, and a 5/6 on turn 3 is a pretty chonky stat block. Seems reasonable. If you're playing a deck that cares about X-Men affiliations like Professor X or Magneto, this is a decent 3 drop. I don't think this outclasses either of the 3 drops we saw on the Brotherhood side, especially in the aggro archetype. But if what you're looking is for something not just to maximize attack, but to be a stickier body, This guy certainly is going to be stickier than either of those two more aggressive three drops that we saw from the Brotherhood side of things. Overall, he's fine. His ability is not game breaking, but there are certainly going to be times where you're going to be able to get a stun that you didn't deserve, or your opponent's not going to be able to declare an attack they should have been able to on the back of this power. But I don't think you can count on it. I don't think you can count on opponents using superpowers and scattering minus ones on themselves. Most shrewd players are going to play around this guy. And how many superpowers are you actually going to be able to pay for all at once to get plus ones out of him? So the energy conversion is just entirely gravy. The rest of the card is actually decently solid. He's a 4-5-1 flight and range on turn three. That's okay. That's going to be good enough for some decks, especially if you're on these teams. Multiple man, one of a kind, swarm. Oh, okay. Oh, they all have different art this time? That's cool. So they do anything different? So they're all two twos. They're all 2/2/1s, except this one has two health and this one has range. This one has martial artist, so he'll attack for 4/4. This guy's a genius. At the start of your main phase, you may search your deck for a character named Multiple Man and put him onto your side. They all have that duper power. Um, So I assume these can search for the other multiple man as well. So you could run like an Avengers Pro, was he Pro Reg? I can't remember, but the other multiple man, either Pro or Anti Reg, whichever team he was on. Uh, the stats are pretty weak. So here's what I would do. I would get all the multiple mans and I would run them in a deck that wants to be able to take advantage of power up synergy. So you run call in there as well. You come out pretty aggressive. You use things like maybe Captain Britain or the Spider Man 2099, and maybe Punisher 2099. Like he would kind of fit on team, but when you have Floki as your six drop, then all of a sudden, every time you throw a power up, it turns into three new cards in your hand. So you get a recharge and then come out with that aggressive push at the end of the game. Would it actually be good to have eight multiple mans as the low drop and kind of a power up centric deck? I don't know. That whole archetype might have seen its heyday come and go already. Card values overall are getting bigger, and none of these seem that big to me. He's probably fine. I'm sure if you're a fan of multiple man, seeing more of him and having the synergy with the other multiple man seems really attractive and fun. These are not bad cards. I think they probably all could have been two drops, and it would have been better. Making them all three drops feels too expensive. I honestly, they all feel too expensive. And I get that part of what you have to pay for here is not just the value on this specific card, but it's the duper power and the deck thinning. Um, I mean, that's actually something to consider. If you're a combo heavy deck, if you're a control deck, running a ton of these multiple mans, as long as you hit one that has the ability to start pulling other multiple mans out of your deck, now you could potentially thin eight cards out of your deck during the early game and be more likely to draw into those potent late game drops to actually get your combo to pull off. That could be a utility for this. Plus, control decks tend to suffer by getting hit in the face a lot in the early game. So having low cost characters that kind of replicate themselves, that could be a control tool as well. In a vacuum, though, it's fine. I don't know. Banshee. Four costs, 6/5/1 with flight. When Banshee appears, you may daze an enemy character. This is fine. I feel like this is right on par with if you're playing that Havoc and you're looking for just solid mid-range tools, this is another solid mid-range tool. You're probably fighting a little bit more honest of a game than some of the Brotherhood cards would, where they're trying to like outpower you in these like really dramatic, sneaky ways like Sabretooth. This is it comes down, it clears off whatever the most annoying blocker is, and then you've got a 6/5 stat line, which is fine. He's also a flyer. Nothing about this card is like wildly out of control. This isn't OP, this isn't necessarily tier one, but very good mid-rangey card. Kind of boring a little bit. Like that's the thing that we need boring cards. We need cards that just consistently do kind of a medium power level thing. Every card can't be a giant power spike, or else the game would be madness. And oh, sometimes the game is madness. Polaris. She looks very confused in this card art. Like very confused. Like she's looking at a puddle of liquid on the floor and trying to determine if it's urine or not. Level of confused. So she's a 4 cost, flight range 7/3/1. 7 attack on turn 4. Again, something I'm always a fan of. With range, you're going to be able to make use of that 7 attack potentially in a safe way. Build phase, pay a green, reveal cards from the top of the deck until you reveal an equipment. Put it into your hand, remove the rest of the cards from the game. So as I was reading this, I thought, oh, it's a new ghost. Because for those that have been around long enough, Ghost was the 6 cost character that revealed cards from the top of the deck until you hit an equipment and either put it equipped to Ghost or into your hand. This does sort of a similar thing, but it removes those cards from the game. I don't think you can do this. Unless you're coupling her with like agent activation, so you actually know what's on top of your deck, you could cut really important cards out of your deck with this. Like until you hit an equipment, if you're looking for like a couple key pieces of equipment and you're looking at this as like, oh well, maybe this could help me fish this important card out of my deck. If it's like a one of a kind equipment, it could be at the bottom of your deck. If it's a Sonic Blaster, all 4 of them could be at the bottom of your deck. You could mill yourself for 30 cards, 50 cards. Like I mean that those are obviously like really exaggerated, you know, gutter ball rolling a one on your d20 kind of moments to have that sort of thing happen with this card. But that's not even like out of the realm of possibility. That's yeah. So I guess you'd have to do a deck that's extremely equipment heavy and equipment focused. Otherwise, this does not work at all. That maybe with Arnim Zola main character, where you can get like by playing equipments as characters, maybe this could survive in that deck. Otherwise, I feel like this just hurts you way too much. Maybe Dormammu and Photograph would want this guy. Yeah, I don't think you ever want to manipulate the magnetic field. If you're building like for funsies decks out of just this box, I think her 7 attack with range on turn 4 is probably good enough to make the cut in like a sealed situation or a just fun at the kitchen table with friends situation. But competitive, like if you're sitting down at a tournament table, I don't think you can play Polaris. 5 cost Sage. Zero. Stop giving me cards with 0 in their stat block upper deck. Flight range 0/10/2. When Sage attacks, she gains attack this combat until her attack is equal to the defender's defense. Okay, okay. At 10 defense, she's going to be hard to hit, so your opponent might have to devote a team attack to getting her out of the way. She's got 2 health. As part of a team attack, you could send her in with somebody else. You're guaranteed to get the stun, and maybe it's like in a durable way. Yeah, your opponent has some ability that can pick off or daze somebody out of a combat, which we've looked at cards that can do that within this box. Sage, coupled with some other attacker that's big enough, well, okay, daze somebody out of this combat, I'm still going to get to you. She's always going to be able to get to him. This has flavor, like this is reminiscent of how Ego in Photograph works a little bit. Not quite the same thing, but that changing of base stats and kind of like locking them there. Although I guess she doesn't lock them there. She just gains attack until she has attack equal to the defender's defense. Now I wonder when exactly that's going to trigger. My guess is if this character attacks into somebody who has, say, what is that card called? Hunted, I think, that gives you +3 defense whenever you're attacked. My guess is because this and the defender power trigger at the same time, since I'm the attacker, I would kind of get a sequence those. Um, or maybe the attack triggers first. I don't know. I would need to look into with with enemy abilities that trigger to give them defense and they trigger when they go into combat. How would that work? Would she get the go up and then the enemy's hunted triggers and they get the +3 defense? I don't think so, but I can't immediately put my finger on the rules justification for it why. So that's something to think about. There's not many cards like that. And if she goes up to whatever their printed defense is, then the enemy abilities trigger. Well, if we're in a meta where hunted is a keyword you have to worry about, okay, well then maybe she's not the 5 drop for you. Overall, though, if you want to play a card on turn 5 that's going to like kill 2 things, you could do a lot worse than this. This is very good, actually. Wow. If something happens to your keywords, you're in trouble. But As long as she keeps her human computer keyword, that's a very strong 5 drop. Professor X, 5 cost, X-Men affiliated, 4/9, 1 with range, welcome home. Look at the enemy player's hand. You may choose a supporting character there and recruit it. I don't think you ever want to be in the position where you're relying on your opponent to get good draws. There's something about rooting for your opponent having a good hand that I think goes against what most of us feel typically as card players. Uh, so I think the best case scenario with this guy, you pay the yellow, you see what combat tricks they have, and you're able to declare your attacks in such a way that nullifies both their combat tricks. And maybe you form in such a way that their next turn recruit is going to be messed up. They won't have good attacks. Like so, the knowledge that you get off of this is probably more important than the recruit power. But there's absolutely going to be times where you're going to pay that yellow and you're going to escape hatch into your opponent's 6 drop, and it's going to be great. You're going to steal Bucky Barnes out of your opponent's hand or some powerful card. This seems good. 4/9 is not my favorite stat block. If you're looking for a 5 cost character that can actually attack, 4 is not going to get you there. That's way too low of a number. But 9 on the defense, maybe he's got a decent chance to survive for a turn, and then you get to see what your opponent has in their hand and maybe steal a card from them. That would feel pretty good. I don't think you can count on the recruit every time. Overall, I think that Professor X not only is going to see play within this kind of box or with people for whom Professor X is a popular character, I think this card is going to see play, period. This is going to be a good tech card. You know if your opponent has their combo, you know what their turn 6 and 7 might look like. Very, very strong overall. I think this is a good 5 drop that's going to see play outside of X-Men specific or this box specific decks. This is a card you're going to need to be ready for at the tournament table in the years going forward. 6 cost Cyclops. Fast trigger while in range combat. Okay, so this is ferocious for ranged. He's an 11/5 with range. He's probably going to come down and kill a thing and then die. Maybe if you've got a main character who can fly up in the front row, maybe you'll get 2 uses out of this guy. I have a hard time seeing this guy stick around too long though, but he's really got just a great combination of words. I mentioned earlier how the 4 drop Sabretooth from the base set was like the best 4 drop in the game for a while, and a lot of that was on the back of ferocious. That card also had berserk on it, so it got bigger as it was doing its ferocious damage. But fast trigger is just a kind of a better ferocious. Ranged attacks, I think we can all agree, are generally better than melee attacks in that you're not going to be able to get clipped back at all some percentage of the time. If your opponent doesn't have range on their character, a ranged attack is absolutely better, and having range attacks open to you as an option, any ranged character can attack. Well, most ranged characters can also attack melee if they need to, but not every melee character can attack range. So overall, having access to range as part of your ability suite is better than not, of course. Adding ferocious onto that is really good. Now, 11 attack, we've already seen a 6 drop who just has a printed 12. Like, come on. Come on. I guess maybe I'm asking for too much. It does seem like all of the bad versions of Cyclops that we've gotten over the years, they got those out of their system, and they're giving us some Cyclopses that like really want to get in and wreck house this time. And High Time. Again, not my favorite character, but if Cyclops is your favorite character, this is a box to be excited about. You can actually have a Cyclops that does cool stuff. 11 attack on turn 6 is a big number, coupled with ferocious, well, ranged ferocious. This guy, I mean, he could come down and potentially decide games if he's just picking things off. So, seems like a pretty decent card. Probably most of the time, though, you're going to kill one thing with him, and then your opponent's going to figure out a way to deal with him. Because 5 defense is pretty crummy on turn 6. Like, if I can get around whatever's in your front row, I'm killing Cyclops if I can. I don't want this guy taking pot shots for the rest of the game. Sunfire. This is a 6 cost 3/3/2 with flight and range. That is ridiculous. 3/3 on turn 6. Gets +3/+3 for each blue location on every side. This has all the same problems as Bishop, only even worse because we're later in the game and you're paying more for it. This card is strictly unplayable. Is You need to have at least 3 face-up blue locations, and this is packaged in a box with a card that lets you just at least 2 cards that let you just turn locations face down. This this is no, no, absolutely not. Dupe, 7 cost, 7/7 flight range, 1. Travel across the margins. When you recruit Dupe, you may put him into your hand. So you can recruit him as a 7/7 flyer if you want. Or you put him into your hand and you turn him around so he can watch the game. So if this is my hand, I've got my cards here. This would be a bad hand, and I have Dupe right here. And as you can see, he's peeking out so he can watch the game. Uh, while he is watching the game, you can pay a blue, a yellow, and a red, and choose a phase for the enemy player for the next enemy player to skip. Draw, recovery, build, or main. So for a cost of 3 resources, you can force your opponent to skip 1 phase. Way too expensive. And you're paying your entire turn 7 for this. Remember, if you're accessing Resident of Marginalia, that means you played this guy and took him off the board and put him back into your hand. So you've got to use all 7 of your recruit points on turn 7. And high drops, I mean, I've gone off about this on the show before, but high drops have to be better than other cards. They have to be immediately impactful because if we're seeing turn 7 in a lot of games, not all games, but in a lot of games, by the time we get to turn 7, we're looking to kill each other. I'm looking for lethal. You're looking for that opening to be able to stack that last wound. So these have to be immediate, high impact cards. This is not giving you any board presence. So the only time you could ever really realistically play this is if you're already ahead on the board. If you do this and then you pay 3 recruit points and you force their opponent to skip their main phase, okay, well, now they can't attack you, but you didn't build anything. They still get a recruit, and the next turn it just delays the problem. If you skip their build phase so they can't put more characters into play, well, now they can go ahead and attack you, and your main character's not protected because you skipped your recruit step. I just can't see where this card fits. I don't think you play this. It's a really fun power. It's silly nonsense, but maybe the right move is to force the opponent to skip recovery. So all the characters they attacked with last time are still essentially frozen. But if they didn't attack with everybody, then they still get an attack. And if they recruit somebody, they're all that person's ready, and they still get to attack. And they no, no, I don't think Dupe is a real card. Still, all right. So Ares is historically speaking a very strong 7 drop that has not gotten its due in the era of the game when it came out because there were other really strong 7 drops. So seeing Rogue fighting Ares, I'm guessing this is going to be a really strong 7 drop. Uh, Flight 992, not the best start. When Rogue gets attacked, so Captain America was a 10/10, but you could only play, like he was loyal to his team. Rogue can go anywhere. Rage. When Rogue gets attacked, put a +1/+1 on her. So if you swing into her, she's a 10. Wonderful Strength. Any combat, pay a green, double the +1 counters on Rogue. She can use this power any number of times each turn. Um, so 992 is probably not good enough a lot of the time. Uh, if your deck specifically is looking for a late game flying blocker, like let's say you're playing Toad, and you know late game your stats aren't really good enough anymore, but he's got range, assuming prehensile tongue, and you can tuck him in the back row, and you just need somebody that can kind of fight a little and get in the way and slow down the opponent. That's probably okay, maybe. Uh, the wonderful strength I don't think is good enough unless you have at least 2 +1 counters on her already. And if the opponent is attacking into Rogue, you have to assume they have the ability to deal with 10/10. If they didn't have the ability to deal with 10/10, like if somebody's coming in with only 9 and I get a +1 from Rage, they made a bad play. We can't count on our opponents making bad plays. So we have to assume the opponent can deal 10/10, which means I can't rely on Rage to get to Wonderful Strength. So I have to have it. This has to go into a deck that has other ways of generating +1 counters. If you look at the Professor X, who gets to put counters on one character to another, you pay for that. Then you have 7 +1 counters on Rogue. Then you Wonderful Strength. Now she's huge, and that could be cool. and would have been more impressive in a world before Sonic Disruptor. And like we just have so many ways to deal with +1 counters now. Even in this box, there's a bunch of characters that say days, which will effectively remove +1 counters. Uh Man, this probably ain't it. I want to like this card. I want there to be a supporting character rogue that I can actually play. The 6 drop A Force one is just not good enough. The main character was too good. Uh, and now here we have another attempt at rogue, and it just doesn't. Uh, sh- so in a deck where you're playing like Might Makes Right and you're relying a lot on generating a bunch of +1 counters, do you still even have any greens left by turn 7, or have you already used those resources earlier in the game? Um, Man, I really want to like this card, but I don't think I can. I could see there being decks built around maximizing your +1s every step of the game. So, like an old pairing from back in the day, rogue main character was solo. If you have solo out on turn 7 somehow, and rogue attacks becomes a 10-10, they attack in with an 11. You turn that into a 13. Potentially, you could do it again if you had to and get up into the low 20s. Um, but that's like, look at how many pieces you have to make it go right. If I go back to what I said about higher drops needing to have like immediate impact on the board, this just doesn't get you there. It just doesn't get you there. That's a bummer. I really like, I like that card art. I saw her beating up a historically good 7 drop from Versus, and I was hoping this was going to be, maybe if she was 10-10. Does it really come down to like one stat point? I'm gonna play with this rogue actually, because I, th- I'm gonna play with this card, and I'm gonna see what else is going on with her, because it may be that her stats, the 9-9. I'm gonna assume that Super Awesome Games tested this card enough that 9-9 coupled with the rest of the words on her, she has the ability to get out of hand some percent of the time. I want to see if I can make it happen. I'm holding out hope for Rogue. Build it up. I talked about this during the card reveal, but we'll go ahead and go through it again here. Mutant Loyalty is probably not good enough to make you want to play any of the cards that have those words on them, but this one is, I think, the worst of the bunch. Well, I don't know. I didn't know about this secondary mutation before. Um, yeah. This lets you turn 2 face down basic locations with different names on your side face up. So there may be games where you're really desperate to have additional uses out of your locations, but I think there's better cards for that already. Uh, I'd probably rather run the 6 drop Iron Man than make my deck mutant loyal to be able to run this card. What am I doing that I need so many locations for? And it can't even be funding one superpower, because to get full value out of this, you have to have at least 2 different locations. Um, I I have a really hard time envisioning a meta where Build It Up sees any play at all. It's going to have to be one of those restrictive metas where Brotherhood and X-Men are kind of like limited teams where we're not allowed to play. It's going to be really hard. If there's any other teams available to build my competitive deck out of, I'm going to be hard pressed to not mean that, because even now, even with this new box, it seems like Brotherhood and X-Men still have some weak points throughout their curve. As long as they have weak points throughout their curve, you're never going to want to go totally loyal Brotherhood X-Men. And if you look at things like, well, I'd be able to run Unwavering Loyalty and Stand Together. Yeah, that's true, but you're going to run both of those cards instead of this one. So this and that. Uh, each individual art panel on this card I actually like, but I do not like cards that have separate art panels on them. This is just a little too fragmented. It looks a little weird in my opinion. But The art itself, both images, I think look pretty cool. I just wish they would have picked one and went with that. This and that. Any combat, put a +1 counter on a character on your side in the combat and a -1 counter on an enemy character in the combat. So this is going to create a net delta of 2. This certainly is a card that can make that rogue I just talked about look a little bit better. This is basically fair and balanced from the Underworld team back in the day, except you can do it during any combat as opposed to only on the main phase. Now, generally, my sort of guiding principle for any combat trick plot twist is I really want to see a delta of 3. I want to have +3 attack or -3 defense or whatever. This is only going to give us. Now, this is a composite of 4, and they are counters, so they could potentially stick around. But if I'm putting a -1 counter on an attacker, I kind of want to crack them back. You know, like I don't necessarily want that -1 to stick around because I want that character stunned at the end of all this. I guess if they're attacking me and I pump out of the range of their attack and I just bounce the attack, if essentially functionally +2 defense is enough to bounce the attack, this could feel kind of good, and you generated a little bit of value for your characters going forward. Um, Maybe compare this to a card like You Won't Like Her When She's Angry, which you could only play on a defender, and it puts 2 +1 counters on the defender. That feels just strictly better than this. Um, yeah, depending upon if your deck really wants to put -1 counters on the opponent or +1 counters on you. If you're getting added value out of either of those game mechanics through some other part of your deck, this card probably has a little bit of increased value for you. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be good enough. Defend the weak. Choose a defender on your side to get +1, +3. Uh, I just went on. +3 is a great number. This is an excellent defensive plot twist. Plus, it gives you a little bit of a buff on the attack. This seems very strong. The X-Men affiliation being required to play this will hold it back a little bit because X-Men is one of those teams that just has had some struggles over the years. But if you are an X-Men fan and you want to play X-Men stuff, this is absolutely a card that I think will make your 60. We have the reprint of School for the Gifted Youngsters. I kind of already talked about how I feel about that, as well as 4 copies of each of the basic locations with the new card art. Okay, overall, to kind of sum up where we're at with this is I think another kind of Civil War style introduce new players to the game, kind of get core basic concepts on it. It doesn't mean any of this is weak. None of this is beginner stuff. And there are some more complex concepts woven into this game, like resource denial, resource reuse. These are things that we didn't really see as much of in Civil War, which was very much targeted to new players. So if we brought new players on with Civil War, this feels like the box that they should would have gotten next. You know, if you started with Civil War in June of 21, well, in June of 22, this is the box you should have picked up as you walked past the upper deck booth at Gen Con again. But we all know the world didn't go exactly the way we wanted to over the last couple of years, so I kind of understand this. Thinking about it from the perspective of that new player who started with Civil War, I think this is an excellent kind of building block to go right alongside that. If you're into the X-Men, I think there's really good representations of a lot of the characters in here, particularly somebody like Professor X, who had kind of a do nothing main character in his first iteration and an unplayable one in his second. Seeing him actually be able to hit the table will be cool. Cyclops, more than any other character, has needed and deserved a good rendition. We also have generally useful aggro tools in the form of like Dakin and Sabretooth. Good mid-range cards here. Really, I think we've kind of hit all the archetypes throughout this box. You're not necessarily going to be able to make the world's best control deck out of only this box, but there are tools in this that I think will appeal to the control player. Although overall, I feel like this box has a little bit more of a get down on the table and fight kind of tools for the aggro and maybe a more aggressively tilted mid-range player. Um, I like it. I'm excited to play with these cards. I'm thrilled to see more versus cards coming out, and I'm really looking forward to like a year where we actually get to see new versus cards on a regular basis instead of just kind of wait and wait and wait. So good things on the horizon. Thanks to everybody who watched. We're gonna wrap things up here. Until next time, as always, go win some games.